Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Viviana Valencia, and I'm the Executive Coordinator. Thank you for being here today at the webinar Online Education, Inclusive Online Teaching for Student Success. Online education is part of our new normal. Faculty and academic staff at educational institutions worldwide have had to adapt their teaching practices to the virtual mode. In this session, our guests will present practical suggestions on how to maintain inclusive practices when teaching online to maximize engagement and success for all students. At the end of the presentation, there will be some time for questions from our audience. I will request our audience if they can add their questions in the section that it says Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You're gonna find a box and not in the chat box. Thank you very much. Before I introduce you to our guest today, I would like to take a couple of minutes to introduce CALDO to those of you who are not familiar with the consortium. CALDO is a consortium composed of 10 of Canada's U15 leading universities, distinguished from other Canadian universities because of their strong research focus. The universities that conform the consortium are the ones that you're seeing right now on your screen, and those are the University of Alberta, University of Calgary, Dalhousie University, Université Laval, McMaster University, University of Ottawa, University of Saskatchewan, University of Toronto, University of Waterloo, and Western University. So what do we do at CALDO? At CALDO, we provide a range of free services to students or young professionals interested in completing a graduate program at one of our member universities. Some of the services that we offer are assistance with the steps to apply for graduate programs, guidance on how to contact professors to be the thesis supervisors, information and scholarships provided by funding agencies from the countries where we work in Latin America. And in addition to the services for prospective students, we also facilitate networking activities for institutional collaborations between our member and the universities in Latin America. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our guests today. They're both from Dalhousie University, one of our esteemed members. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jennifer McDonald. Jennifer researches, publishes, and presents on topics at the intersection between critical applied linguistics, internationalization of higher education, and English for academic purposes. Her doctoral research at the UCL Institution of Education in London, UK, tackled the challenges of language policies, politics, and pedagogy in the linguistically diverse context of internationalized Canadian higher education. Her books include Academic Inquiry 1, Sentences and Paragraphs with Marcia Kim from an Oxford University Press, and New Perspectives on Pedagogies for English for Academic Purposes, co-edited with Carl McMade, forthcoming in 2021. Jennifer is also a head teacher of ESL programs at Dalhousie University in Halifax, where she's the academic lead on a variety of programs for English for academic purposes. She's engaged in initiatives in support of international students, academic language and literacy, and internationalization at Dalhousie. Welcome, Jennifer. It is also my pleasure to introduce you to Ms. Ajesha Mushtaq. Ajesha is an English as a second language and English for academic purposes educator. Ajesha also has been involved in teaching assessment design, educational policy work, and curriculum development for the past 13 years in a higher education context. Apart from piloting university courses at St. Mary's and Dalhousie University, she has co-designed a Dalhousie certificate for academics who teach English as a medium of instruction using content and language integrated learning methodology. In addition, she is the Academic Integrity Officer for the College of Continuing Education at Dalhousie University. She's also currently pursuing her doctorate degree in educational leadership with a focus on internationalization in higher education curriculum. Thank you both very much for being here today. I will now leave the floor for the two of you to present.
Great, wonderful, Viviana. Hi, everyone. We're really happy to be here. I am just going to share my screen. So here we go. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're really happy to be here. As Viviana has just shared, We are both of us here today with you from Dalhousie University. Aisha, did you want to have a few words?
Yes, hello everyone. It's nice to meet with you and connect with you. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. And hopefully we can all learn together and have a really good conversation at the end.
Exactly. And for those of you that don't know, Dalhousie University is Caldo's easternmost member. So Dalhousie is located in the province of Nova Scotia on the Atlantic coast of Canada. So if you can imagine it, 2 hours north of New York, 2 hours east of Toronto. So we're really happy to be with you and that you're joining us from across the Americas. Here's our agenda for today. So we're going to be talking about inclusive education and how to extend and foster the principles of inclusive education in an online teaching environment. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about what inclusive education is, the definition, some of its important principles, and then we'll give an example of a framework for inclusive education, which is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Then we'll move on to some more practical strategies. I know that I'm sure many of you here today are practitioners, so you're involved directly in teaching with and working with students at your institutions and now working with them online. So we're going to move to talk about some very practical tips, strategies, and ideas that you can bring into your teaching practice. And then we're going to leave a good amount of time for us to have a question and answer period. And me da muchísimo gusto poder responderles en español and also in English in the question period. So as Viviana was saying, if you can put your questions in the Q&A box in the language of your choosing, we'll be happy to get to those at the end. Okay.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. So let's start with looking at what inclusive education is. So kind of just defining what the parameters are of inclusive education, and also why it's so important to talk about inclusive education as we develop online programs and teach online as well. I know that with the pandemic, online has become more of a necessity, more of something that we really have to do, but apart from pandemic, beyond pandemic, I'm hoping that online learning is advantageous for our students as well. So just going to the heart of our education is our students, our learners, and talking about who they are is extremely important. In our face-to-face class, not talking about online for now, but in our face-to-face class, we meet our students every day. We talk to them, we built our rapport, and definitely by the end of the term, we know more about our students. We know about their learning styles, but this becomes a challenge when we are teaching online. So students bring so much more to the classroom than we know by their face or by their visible virtual presence. So looking at some of this here on this slide, who are our online learners, we see that in our virtual classes, their ages can be different because not everyone has an opportunity to go back to school because it's flexible. The timings can be adjusted to our work schedules as well. So age becomes an important factor in, as an instructional designer, as a teacher, as a faculty member, I would like to know the age of my student because it impacts the way they learn. Their race, their ethnicity, gender, location, where they're from because of day and night differences, time zones. They bring their own life experiences and also speak different languages, like Jennifer just spoke Spanish, and their different worldviews, which are important for their learning. It impacts their learning, the values that they bring and beliefs as well. They are a part of who our students are. So knowing that helps us teach better and create a learning environment. Also, their learning preferences can be different. Some of them might be social learners that they learn through discussion. Some of them might be more introvert and learn through their own readings or want some alone time as they're learning. And also, very, very important is to look at our perceptual capabilities. And I bring this up in our first slide because, the first day of class as an instructor, sometimes I have made the mistake of thinking, oh, this is the first day for everybody. We're all on the same page. We're going to start new. But that is not true. On the first day of class, even, our students bring different views with them, different skills with them, and they're not at the same level at all. Some of them might be higher, some of them might need a bit more support. So understanding that and making sure that everybody's learning, everybody is progressing, that is what inclusive education means. So bringing on to the next slide, let's take a look. um, this is what inclusive education means. I'm just going to read from it because it's a really good definition. It covers quite a lot of ground, and it is from Ontario's Equity and Inclusive Education Policy. So inclusive education is defined as a learning environment. So it's not just a strategy, but it's an environment in itself that promotes the full personal, academic, and professional development of all learners, irrespective of race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, disability, learning styles, and language. So as faculty members, as teachers, as staff members, as institutional members of our universities, it becomes even more important for us to understand that students bring different perceptions to our classroom, and it's all good. How can we look at those perceptions and use them for everyone's learning is extremely important. So being aware of that and teaching towards it, creating an environment that is inclusive towards all of this is inclusive education. In the next two slides, I'm going to talk a bit about an institutional level planning that we can do to promote inclusive education. And then I'll also talk about at an instructional level of how faculty members can promote inclusive education. So these are kind of umbrella things, and Jennifer and I are going to talk about some practical suggestions as well. So just at the policy level, there's so much that institutions can do for professional development of faculty, because faculty also need support, our admin staff also need supports, our TAs and school services also need support. So having that professional development um, um, around designing and teaching for diverse students and for accessibility is important. And also factoring in the respect and value that students bring, which is different for different cultures and impacts the way students and teachers interact or students interact with their learning. So having that inbuilt in our systems is important. Again, online learning has two challenges, not just the content itself, but technology is also a challenge, and it also provides learning opportunities for our students. And online learning becomes important because technology is the future. I mean, the future is now, but also in the future as well. So making sure that our students are equipped not just with the content knowledge, but with how to handle that technology and work on that academic content with that technology and combining it together to give them the 21st century skills and beyond is important too. So giving that consideration into our planning is important at an institutional level. Then another concern is that a lot of the times, especially during the pandemic, when everybody is in an emergency zone and we have sort of retrofitted what we had for our face-to-face learning into online learning. And sometimes this can be problematic for our students because we're just trying to make sure that everybody is on the same page, but they're probably not. So making sure that we're not just teaching to a dominant student stream, but we are looking at the differences, and the diversity is equally important. And then my wheelhouse, internationalization of curriculum. So what we do with our curriculum is important too. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more at the end, but internationalizing our curriculum and making sure that we are teaching to a diverse audience and teaching through a diverse content material is important to mitigate marginalization within our classes as well. So this is an institutional level policies. These changes can only happen if our institution is ready to change, right? And then as the institution decides on these policies, it can trickle down into our classrooms and can have a direct impact on our students. So the next slide, where we look at our instructional practices. So there are 5 principles that were given by in the book America's Unmet Promise, and it's quite a good read as well. So some principles include clarity in our language, making sure that students understand what's going on. And this is something I think a lot of faculty members would agree with. You say something in class and you think that students have understood it. You even ask, have you understood? And a lot of them will say yes, but maybe there are quite a few who have not. So making sure to reinforce the message and our expectations is important. And then deliberately being equity minded. Equity minded, again, like I talked about in the definition of inclusive education, is to be able to understand, be aware of, and be cognizant of the differences in our classes is important. So that's equity mindedness. And our instructional language and our teaching practice reflect that we are being equity minded. And that would be through our practices and policies. And then moving on, when we enact those, equity requires a continual process that again brings us system support. So building our systems in a way that we learn by getting feedback, getting into the habit or into a practice of accounting where we can learn more and how we can change our activities for the better. Having that kind of growth mindset is important. And this can be done, I'll talk about it a bit more later on, but this can be done at an activity level, at a classroom level, but then at a program level as well. And these changes can, again, only happen if our institution is ready to change. Institution wants to support its faculty members. So being faculty members, we do have a platform where we can ask for such support as well. So that's kind of the instructional level changes that we have. So Jennifer, do you want to continue with the next slide?
Okay, so Aisha's given us a bit of an introduction to the big concepts of inclusive education and how that might be applied on the institutional and at the instructional level. What I want to share now is one framework, one tool that is a tool of inclusive education. And this is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. I would love to know how many of you are familiar with UDL or have perhaps used it before. So if you can just put either by raising your hand or putting a note in the chat box, I'd love to know who's used UDL before. For those that haven't, what is UDL? So UDL, this is a tool, and the goal is to basically provide equity and equal access to learning for all the students who may be sitting in your classroom, regardless of ability, of background, or of any of the other defining characteristics. In a nutshell, and we have, I wanted to mention, we're going to make the slides available for you via Caldo, because we put in these slides a lot of great resources, some websites where you can really go and explore some of the ideas and the tools that we'll be talking about. And so in a nutshell, UDL encourages us to think about adding variety and ensuring multiple means of engagement with the learning and with the course material, providing multiple means of representation. So this is around the what, multiple means of representation of what is being taught and learned, and also allowing for multiple means of action and expression. So providing ways to learn and to actually carry out learning. So from the CAST website that I've included here, there's some really interesting tools that kind of explain a little bit more these three aspects of UDL. So for example, in terms of providing multiple means of engagement, this is trying to ensure that students can connect with learning and with your course content in different ways. So options for recruiting interest, sustaining effort and persistence in the courses, as well as self-regulation and self-efficacy in learning. So that's that first column here, the green column. In terms of providing multiple means of representation, this is really about the what, the information, the content in the course, and providing different ways for this information to be perceived, visually, auditorily, written, etc. Providing different options for connecting with the language and the symbols in a text. And this can be especially important if we have linguistically diverse groups of learners, as well as providing options for comprehension to maximize transfer of what's being learned to different contexts. Finally, in terms of action and expression and providing different options for that, this is about allowing students to show their learning and to be assessed using different means, different media, different tools, and fluency in some of these different tools and avenues for action and expression. So this is one tool that can be used and applied for inclusive education in the higher education classroom. I'm going to return to it in a minute and to talk about very specifically some digital tools and platforms that you can use to target some of these different ways of adding variety into your classes. So we will move on to strategies. So what are some practical tips on how we can include these in our teaching? Now, as we start to talk about online teaching, now I know some of you have been teaching online for years, and that's great. Some of us may be newer to online teaching. Myself, as an example, I've used a lot of digital tools in my practice over the years. I've been a big fan of technology for a while, but this spring was the first time when I was involved in fully online courses and course delivery. I'd been a fully online student, but never in the educator's chair. So one really great tool that I find for thinking about, reflecting on, and conceptualizing the online educational experience is this model that I have up on the screen called the community of inquiry. So this isn't, look, this is from the year 2000. This is not a new model, but I find it exceptionally useful for thinking about our online practice. Okay, so I'm just going to talk quickly about this model, this diagram that you see on the screen. And then we'll talk about how to address some of these different aspects of online teaching inclusively. So if we look at the online model here, we can see that the educational experience right in the middle is made up of 3 spheres, let's call them. So let's start with cognitive presence. So that's one of the important spheres. What's cognitive presence? Cognitive presence is the material. That's a material in your course, whatever it may be it English language, biology, marketing, or what have you. We have the cognitive presence. We have the social presence, which of course is that, that presence, the cohesion between class members and their interaction and the climate that they have together. Then finally, on the bottom, the other important sphere is the teaching presence. So that is your and our presence as educators, as teachers in the classroom, and the choices we make about the material, how we present it, and how we carry out our classes. So what's interesting to see is how these 3 big spheres overlap. So if we look at how teaching presence overlaps with cognitive presence, in the area where it says selecting content, this is where the teacher, where you exercise your expertise. The image I like to say is we help students drink out of the fire hose. So there's an unlimited amount of information out there, but how we select the content and how we curate that and choose to present it is a big part of this educational experience. Now, if we look at the top there where cognitive presence overlaps with social presence, we have supporting discourse. So in sociocultural approaches to learning, we learn through interaction with the course material and with each other, through exchange, through dialogue, and through discourse around whatever it is we happen to be learning. So it's this overlap of the social, the interaction between class members, between students, around that cognitive material, so the course content, where learning happens. So it's through that discourse that learning happens. And then finally, where social presence and teaching presence overlap is your role and our role as educators in setting the climate. How do we build a climate that will encourage learning and will encourage connections between members of the class? So all of these things come together in an online environment to make the online educational experience. So, okay, with this in mind, and with all of these different aspects of the online education experience in mind, let's talk about some strategies for inclusivity in the online context. Oh, Aisha, you're still muted.
Thank you. I would have gone on like this. So here's the thing. So keeping in mind communities of inquiry that Jennifer talks about, and that really a central part where it says student experience or educational experience for our students, that's important. And based on that particular format, with inclusive learning, there are three foundational underpinnings. So being equity minded is one, cultural relevance. So we need to make sure that our students, whatever we are teaching is relevant to our students or going to be relevant to their future. If they're not engaging with the content, there's not much learning happening, right? And then social engagement, like Jennifer talked about, supporting discourse and how students can communicate with each other, not just communicating the content, but also having a space where they communicate maybe a learning problem where they're unable to understand a particular assignment. All of this is important, and all of this together gives students a really good educational learning experience. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk a bit about a few strategies on how to develop that. So one thing that we look at in our online learning environment is creating an inclusive environment for our students. And what that means is communicating our goals and objectives clearly in the beginning, making sure that we have ground rules where everybody gets to participate in a class and not just the eager ones who raise their hands and get to give all the answers or get to choose the assignment. So making sure that there are rules that support everybody in the classroom, regardless of whether they're very social or not very social. Also, we need to make a deliberate effort to know who our students are. And that helps us establishing those ground rules and making sure that the way we are communicating our goals and objectives is clearly understood across the class. Also, encouraging students to actively consider perspectives other than their own. This is kind of a challenge of inclusive environment as well, but it leads into more of global skills. And that is I think one of the core goals of higher education is to teach our students global values. And that could include issues of, say, for example, if you're an engineering student, we look at things from a sustainability lens. So what's happening in our local environment, but then also what's happening in areas which are not as equipped with sustainability issues. So making sure to have those other perspectives and making sure our students discuss those in class actually gives them that global perspective and creates an inclusive environment in our classrooms as well. And then, of course, where we have students from different backgrounds, definitely some conversations can become challenging. So planning in advance on whether this particular topic could be challenging and just, being a bit more insightful on how the conversations might go helps develop good, safe environment for conversations. So some examples of how that fits in is having online discussions. And um, it depends on, I think, the softwares that we use, and Jennifer is going to talk about tech in a minute as well. But having online discussions is something students can do to promote that social presence, as you can see highlighted there, and also helps us set a climate where students are able to talk to each other through a program level. It's not something that they have decided on their own, but they're supported by us as educators to have that discussion. We can also, if you're communicating our goals clearly and objectively, a lot of educators I've seen have fun quizzes on syllabus or making all those memes about course outlines and reading them. So making sure we enforce that in our classrooms. Student introduction, like I talked about in the first slide, students bring so much more. So giving them a space to introduce themselves to us in a way they want to is important. And then giving choice in their work. And I say choice because we can't, I have learned it personally that I cannot limit my students by giving them, hey, this is a assignment, you're going to do it like this, you're going to do it in the same framework I've given you. Giving students some flexibility just gives them more accountability, I guess, and automatically develop some kind of responsibility that, oh, this is my own work. So having choice in the way they submit their work or choose the work they want to present in the class as an assignment or an assessment is important. In the next slide, so that's one, creating an inclusive environment, but also creating a growth mindset. And I say growth mindset in the strictest sense of an educator. And by growth mindset, I also mean that abilities can be achieved and through challenge, through hard work, through perseverance, and building that in our program is important. So, and that empowers all students for success. I say this, so say for example, you have an assignment given to a student and maybe a student doesn't do well, but comes to you and says, hey, I want to improve on this. That's right there an opportunity for growth for that particular student. So having built up that flexibility in our program is going to help our students be better than they were yesterday, and having a race of their own and not comparing them to other students who might be on a different spectrum um, of how you can say different spectrum of learning or different spectrum of competency, right? So students learning on their own, being better every day is important. So that's focusing on the learning process itself. And this can also happen through critical feedback. Again, like I said, that giving students a chance to improve their grade because our students are so focused on grades. That's why one of the things that I have learned, and I practice a lot in my classes, is in the beginning 2 or 3 weeks, I try to have very low stake grades in my class. So students are just learning, building that environment and confidence. Hey, it's okay to make mistakes. I often tell my students when I'm soliciting answers from them, I say, okay, time for you to give me answers. And I also say, I also like bad answers or wrong answers. Feel free to give me those as well, so that everybody feels, oh, I can talk in this class. Some of the ways in which we can address growth mindset is to make sure that students have tech access online. They have choice in the class. We are giving them formative assessment on how to improve an assignment that they're working on, and also giving them a chance to do alternative assessments. So for example, if my goal in an assignment is to have an engineering focus, then maybe it doesn't matter if they're giving me a written assignment or a video, right? So giving that alternative to put in an assessment is important. But I understand as faculty, this could be like, ooh, too much work for us. So making sure, again, going back to the institutional level support, that we have support where we are also not burned out as educators and as faculty members. Moving on to the next point here is including diverse content, materials, and ideas. This is, I think, at the heart of being inclusive in our classes, and that talks to internationalizing our curriculum. By internationalization, if you look at the examples, it means that having research or case studies from diverse cultures, and not just one culture, and not just a dominant culture. Sometimes a lot of our material, and I've heard this a lot in academic conversation, but all the research is in English. Not necessarily true. There's a lot of research done all over the world in different languages as well, and there are translations available. Those case studies might be available in English, but they have a different a cultural spectrum to it. So including those in our curriculum, deliberately making sure that a student's culture is represented in our curriculum is important. So again, talking about diversity in author representation, making sure that the reading list that we are giving our students has a wide variety of different authors talking about the same subject. And this also talks to, again, global skills, global workforce, because that's what we are preparing our students for in a higher education context, to be able to work with a diverse workforce. Again, open choice assessments are important. So if you look at the community of inquiry table here, we are looking at cognitive presence. So they're still learning the content, but through a different cultural lens. That's important. Looking at research from different angles is important. Bringing in walking the talk on diversity and inclusion is important in designing our curriculum, right? And we give our teaching presence as well, and we kind of give credibility to the culture of our students when we promote readings from their culture as well. So if we move on to the next slide here, talking about feedback, this goes back to system learning and institutional work. We have to build a system where we are also learning, because I might not know how to teach the first day. I might not be good at it at all, but being open to what worked, what didn't work as an educator helps me improve myself. So having that growth mindset for my own self and my own teaching is important. And I can use a variety of tech tools to gather data like this, even in online. So maybe just having a quick survey to say, oh, how did you find this activity? Or, oh, I didn't find a lot of responses in this activity. What went wrong? What happened? So just having that growth mindset to get feedback helps. So that's kind of an institutional level thing that can happen. And if we embed that into our professional practices, then we ourselves are embracing inclusion in a way that is going to stay and is not there just because it's a trend or because that's the word of the day, but it's in a part of our system now, and we are embedded in it, and it's going to stay. It's going to be sustainable. So on the next, okay.
Okay. So just to continue on with some of these tips and strategies, I hope Aisha's gotten you thinking about and reflecting about some different ways to just infuse inclusive practices in your online teaching. I'm sure you are, your teaching practice is full of inclusivity, and hopefully these are giving you some ideas to just add a little bit more, to up the level, and to, or perhaps to bring inclusive practices into one sphere of your teaching that perhaps it was absent from before. Let's talk about technology and its role in this, because you know, teaching online, technology is, it's the elephant in the room, isn't it, right? We can't get around it. So in terms of being inclusive in our teaching practices around technology, an important thing is to remember, even though we're teaching online, and even though we may be teaching groups of people younger than us, and sometimes we have the idea that maybe everyone under 30 is just born with a cell phone in their hand, right? But that's not necessarily the case. There is a level of digital literacy that should be ensured. So perhaps make sure that in your classes you spend enough time teaching the tools, presenting and giving opportunities for people to learn how to use the platforms or technologies you'll be using, so that everyone's beginning off of the same level. Access to technology can be an issue. We know that, you know, here in Canada, in Nova Scotia, there's some areas, rural areas, where the internet speed is very slow. And there's other places where perhaps socioeconomically, internet access or home computers are not very common. So keeping that in mind, and if we go to use a tool, a tech tool in class, making sure that, can someone access it from their phone? Or do they have to be on a computer? So keeping that in mind. And another way to think about technology is also as a tool, as an assistive technology that can help you apply some of the principles of universal design for learning, that can help you apply some of the principles of inclusive teaching. So for example, captioning video, if you record your lectures or you record your course content, adding captions to those, text-to-speech, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, but text-to-speech platforms that take the written word and speak it to put it into a vocal form. That can be an important tool for inclusivity. Flexibility in deadlines and alternative mode of delivery and submission. So using our different platforms, our different tools to help us be more flexible and around in our practices in class. Now, I would love to know if you could put in the chat, I'd love to know which platforms you use for your teaching. So at Dalhousie, we use a platform called D2L. It's a Canadian online learning platform. I know Canvas, Blackboard are very popular. Moodle is another popular one. Some people use Google Classrooms or Google for Education. Microsoft Office can be used. Okay, Rory, yeah, you're saying that you use Moodle and Blackboard. Okay, Collaborate, Zoom, great. Okay, so we have lots of different tools, Moodle, Canvas, Teams. Yep, so the Microsoft suite is another platform. So let's talk about how we can address some of the aspects of UDL using some of these platforms and tools that you've mentioned. Okay, so if we go back to UDL, you remember we talk about different forms of engagement, of representation, and of action and expression. So in terms of tech tools, some of the most salient aspects of UDL that we can use tech for are things like offering different ways to display information, to transmit information. So auditory versus text-based. Also providing options for languages and symbols, clarifying vocabulary, etc. And also in terms of comprehension, activating and supplying students' background knowledge. So every student comes to the classroom with a host, with years of knowledge about the world and about different things, about different aspects of the subject matter, of different cultural knowledge. And so allowing people to be able to tap into those is an important thing that we can use tech for. In terms of action and expression, allowing students to demonstrate their learning in different ways, to demonstrate it individually, collaboratively, text-based, video, audio. These are all ways that we can use tech to help us. So let's talk about a couple of examples. So some of you have mentioned using the Microsoft suite of products, the Google suite and apps. If we want to talk about using text-to-speech, this can allow people who to take a text, a reading text, and to have it read to them. So this can be helpful for people who have a slow reading speed, perhaps people that have a visual impairment, folks that prefer their learning preferences lend towards the more auditory rather than a visual. And so we have built into things like Google Docs, Word Online, you can activate the text-to-speech engine, and these, so your students can have texts read to them. PDF readers as well, many of them allow for text-to-speech. Automatic speech recognition is another very powerful tool that can contribute to UDL. For example, And what automatic speech recognition is, of course, is the tools that when we speak, it writes down what we say. So students who perhaps live with learning disabilities might prefer to use an automatic speech recognition to dictate texts. And a really important aspect of ASR is to caption your videos. So in Microsoft Stream, we can caption our videos. YouTube also has an automatic caption function that allows you to basically upload a video that you've recorded, and it will add the captions directly onto the video. So that's another way to add a layer of accessibility to your course content. Collaborative documents, of course, are another way to allow for variety in action and expression. So be it, and you know, there's lots of different tools for collaborative text creation or the like. So Word Online, PowerPoint Online. We have Google Docs that allow us to collaborate together on a text. What else? Also, we have tools that allow for collaboration and the creation of more visual texts. So things like Google Jamboard can allow for this type of collaboration in the visual mode as well as the written mode. Now, I'm sharing with you here a couple of really very, very rich sites and sources of links where you can find different tools, apps, and platforms to help you bring some of these aspects of UDL and inclusive education into your teaching. So the first one is this website called UDL Tech Toolkit. And you can see they have all kinds of different tools for multimedia and digital storytelling. So allowing students to express and demonstrate their learning in a multimedia way, rather than just writing a paper or giving a presentation. We have graphic organizers that allow for students to take notes in a graphic way. So mind maps or diagrams. There's text-to-speech tools on here, study skills tools, and some literacy tools. So this is, for example, tools that allow a student when engaging or reading a text online to simply highlight any word and to see automatically a dictionary entry, either in the language of the text or a bilingual dictionary to tap into their knowledge if your students are working in a second or additional language in your class. Having built-in access to a bilingual dictionary allows them to access their previous knowledge and their other languages in their linguistic repertoire. Another gold mine, I might say, is this website by, he's a Canadian educator named Nathan Hall. And what he has is this huge list on his website of tools where no registration is needed. So how many times have you tried to use a new tool or app to bring a dynamic new aspect to your teaching, and then you have to sign up for an account, or you have to pay, or you have to buy it, and your students get turned off, or it can be an obstacle to learning, can't it? So what he gives is a huge list of different tools where no registration is needed. So everything for screen capture, to video edit and to create videos, audio, to annotate, so to take a reading and to allow for, let's say, a group of people or many people in the class to all read a text together and to make notes on that text together. So to add that social dimension to their learning. This list is so huge on this website, I couldn't put it all here, but I encourage you to check it out and to find some tools that you can bring into your teaching. So we've talked a little bit about inclusive education. We've talked about what it is, some aspects of it for reflection. We talked about a bit about UDL, and I know I'm sure we have some UDL experts here, and it's a fascinating and very rich tool. There's lots of resources online. Today's was just a very quick introduction to it, but that's a tool that you might explore. We've talked about the community of inquiry as a way of examining our online teaching practice, and then some different aspects of how we can bring inclusive education, even in just some easy, small ways into our online teaching. So now let's look to the Q&A and to take some questions. Let's have a little bit of a discussion about this, about some tools, about inclusivity. Please feel free to share some of your practices. We'd love to hear them. And I'm just looking at the Q&A. So taking a bit of a read here. Aisha, did you have a chance to look at the question in the Q&A? So talking about generational differences, and also talking about some difficult conversations and how to maybe to tackle those in class. Did you have any comments about that, Aisha?
Yeah, I'm just reading it right now.
Jennifer, Aisha, just while you read the question, I'd just like to address our audience and mention that, yes, we're going to be providing the recording of the session because I know there's a lot of valuable information that Jennifer and Aisha shared with us today. And I'm pretty sure maybe not everyone had that time to make notes. So we will share the recording so you have some time to review it as you leisure. If you register, we will send it to you via email in the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think one of the questions Roy here is asking about those difficult conversations or challenging conversations to have, and it is true. It's a great question, a fair question, and not all conversations are going to be easy. I think one of the things, we talked about establishing ground rules, that this is a class we're going to talk about differences, so embrace that we are going to have different opinions, and let's talk about those, and make sure to have I think you talked about people getting a bit angry and aggressive and being radical, like you say. So I think we address that as well. There's a lot of coaching that can happen before that conversation happens. So talking about concepts, what they mean, where they came from. So giving some historical aspect to it and the future, and also talking about the impact some conversations have. Having a conversation in itself is a learning process, I think, and being able to just be able to listen to somebody saying something that I just don't agree with in itself is a learning process. It's a skill that we all need to develop. So just maybe going from that lens that today we are going to share difference of opinion, and it is okay to have a difference, but establishing ground rules on respect, on making sure that other people bring their different values and beliefs, and limiting maybe the conversation a bit, like everybody is allowed to have one comment, or everybody is allowed to comment on this particular aspect. So controlling some variables of that conversation will help proceed forward. And maybe the first one will be just at the basic level where we're just learning about each other's opinion and not commenting back. And then maybe in the next session, we had a chance to think about it and then talk a bit more. So maybe guiding conversations is going to help in this particular context, right? Yes.
Great. I thought I would move to James, your question. How do we make sure to balance attempts to make everyone participate in class, and not just the eager ones that always raise their hands, but at the same time respecting individual times and anxieties of different students? I think that this is one of the really wonderful advantages of online teaching, is that it allows for a variety of forms. So if we think of UDL, it allows for a variety of forms of action and expression. And so we can widen our definition of participation. So for example, participation could be in in a class on Zoom, turning your microphone on, turning your camera on, and speaking. It could be speaking into the chat box. It could be contributing to a discussion forum, so something that happens offline or asynchronously. It could be posting a video response to another classmate's activities or their contributions. So I think that, and in doing this and in allowing a variety of forms for people to participate and widening our definition of what participation is, this allows people to participate in ways that might make them feel most comfortable. So one thing that we've seen in our some of our classes at Dalhousie is in the use of the discussion forums. So we have written discussion forums where people have discussions. They can write responses, so written responses or video or audio responses. And especially around the written responses, there have been some wonderful examples of students who in a face-to-face environment were very reserved. They were quiet. Maybe they were not very eager to participate. But in the written discussion forums, they open up, they write these long, beautiful texts, they interact with their classmates, they really, really participate in a great way. So that can be one way to acknowledge this. And same thing with video. Some people who are maybe less comfortable about speaking up in class because maybe they're shy, they're afraid they might make a mistake or say something that they didn't mean to. With a video or with an audio participation, then that allows them to take their time to re-record if they make a mistake, but they still can participate and in the class discussions.
Thank you very much, Jen. Just looking at the clock, and we have time for 2 more questions. Also, I would like to ask our audience if they can stick until the end. At the end, there is going to be a very short survey where we would ask you if there's interest for other type of similar webinars, but with different content, to please let us know, because I saw questions there are going to be other similar webinars being offered. So that will be actually up to you and the interest that you show and this type of events. Thank you very much. So yeah, Ayesha, if you would like to continue, notice that you marked a question there.
Okay, I think I was just going to address Susan's question, and Jennifer talked a bit about it too, so I'm just going to piggyback on what Jennifer said and talk a little bit more about a live collaborate session or a live class session where students don't really like to answer. So like Jennifer talked about, an asynchronous method where students have more time to think, more flexibility to in their own time, in their own space, give answers or record their answers. That's one way of showing engagement. One thing that I do in my classes is maybe to avoid white space where I ask a question and then nobody responds and I feel like, oh, maybe I'm alone in this classroom, is to make a list of who can talk and maybe ask them, okay, this is the list of our speakers today. So students are aware that I'm taking away a bit of choice from them, but it's still something that I can do in an online session just for me to know that learning is happening. So what I do is I have a list where my students are going to present on a topic, but I have another list with the name of a student. I have the person who's going to comment. So now I am sure that one of my students is going to be talking, but another is listening and going to comment on that live, and giving that kind of giving them a heads up that this is going to come up, so be prepared. I think that's something that helps too. But like Jennifer said, there are many asynchronous methods of making sure that students participate. Again, just going back into why we want students to participate, what is our goal? So if learning is happening without participation, maybe that's something that we can look into and say, okay, there are some students who are just not going to respond, and maybe that's then probably going back to looking at the goals and objectives of that particular activity. Right.
Thank you very much, Ayesha. Jennifer, would you like to add something else?
Oh, I was just going to see if we have time maybe for like one one last question. There's such good questions here.
Yes.
And it's always so wonderful to be connecting with such a engaged group of educators. So I actually am going to take a question from Rodrigo from the chat.
Yes.
And about how do you prepare teachers in digital skills? And this is a huge issue, isn't it? Right? We can have all the ideas and all the great intentions in the world, but if as teachers we don't feel comfortable using different digital tools, then it's, you know, it can be a very difficult challenge. So I wanted to just share something that we found at Dalhousie, which is peer learning. So peer learning and sharing. You know, I know there's a lot of variables and factors that can come into play, but in our staff, we found that peer learning has been very effective. So if you have one teacher who is very comfortable using a certain tech tool, they can share and teach and coach their colleagues into using it. So that's been one really great thing. You know, webinars like this, formal classes, it can also provide some ways to acquire digital skills. But then also, I'm a big proponent of learning by doing. So giving it a try, choosing, let's say you choose one tool or one aspect of your teaching that you'd like to work on this semester, and just giving it a try and playing with it. If you make a mistake, you know, so be it, but learning by doing can really bring us a long way, especially with technology where reading about it is nothing until you try to really do it, in my opinion. Aisha, I don't know if you have any other comments around that?
No, Jennifer, I think that was a perfect ending to invite people to look at one aspect that they might want to change. I think that was great. Thank you.
Exactly. So I'm conscious of the time. I don't want to take us over time. There will be access to the recording of this webinar. And because there's so many good questions here, I think, as Viviane has said, hopefully we'll have some more webinars of this type where we can talk about teaching and learning practices, techniques, and ideas, because we have a very, very rich community of educators here participating in the CALO Consortium. So it's been really great. So also, I'll put up here on the screen, here you have our, here we go, our email addresses. So if you'd like to continue the conversation, feel free to get in touch. We are both of us love teaching. We love chatting with other educators about these types of topics, about these types of things, online education, internationalization. So please do be in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks everyone for your input and your participation today. It's been nice learning with you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Ayesha, would you like to say some final remarks?
No, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for being such an engaging audience. And like Jennifer said, feel free to send emails our way, and we would love to chat and carry on with the conversations. Thank you very much.